Tēnā koutou katoa. Welcome to this short video on approaching preaching from Romans chapter 5, which is the next lection in the book of Romans as we go through this Year A series. I want to encourage you that if you get the chance to, you may want to consider extending the reading in the service to cover the whole of chapter 5. But if not, it's certainly important that you read through the whole of chapter 5. And I'm just going to spend a little bit of time on why that is. I want to encourage you that there is a richness to what's going on in the verses 1 through 8, which is the lection that is set down. It's definitely worth just carrying on a little bit in your own preparation into verses 9, 10, and 11, which speak about some of the specifics of what in theology is called the atonement. So it's the way in which Jesus' death has the power to bring us back into this right relationship with God, this right standing. I want to just think here a little bit in that wider picture of how the book of Romans works here, because if you recall in the previous video, we were talking about the fact that Romans is preparing the church for mission. It's not a theological treatise. It's not there mostly about sorting out our doctrine inside our individual heads. It's making sure that we're united as a church in the truth, in the case of the letter in its original setting, so that the Roman churches can help Paul go on to Spain, where he can be an evangelist. And so the book of Romans is here to help us evangelize the world. Now, in Romans chapter 5, we find the story of Jesus tied into the story of humanity. That's what happens in the back half of the chapter. Jesus is compared to Adam. In fact, Paul kind of makes this case that Adam is like a sort of precursor to Jesus and functions only so that Jesus can eventually come along and be a second Adam. And the point here is to say that there's a parallel between the common plight of humanity, the common problem that humans have, and the common solution that Jesus is. In other words, Jesus is Jewish, he's in the people of Israel, but just as Israel's story was supposed to change the whole world, Paul is now saying Jesus' story is the one that's going to be the real change for the whole world. This is why he reaches back for the figure of Adam. He's trying to say how this affects the whole of humanity. Now think about how this works in the setting of preparing people for mission and evangelism. This is in a sense to say, actually this message is not just for those of you who have heard it already, it's for everybody. So by the time we get to the end of the letter, of course we need to send Paul the evangelist off to Spain. We need to get our act together as a church here because the whole of humanity needs to hear this message. So that's the mission, the evangelism context of this. And in the first part of chapter 5, verses 1 through 8, or the section really carries on through to verse 11, even though our set reading in church is verses 1 through 8. This is a way in which humanity's problem, that it has become God's enemy, finds a solution in the death of Jesus. Now, I want to point you to what Reverend Seller sent out in terms of commentary resource for the detail of this, but I wonder if you can just see here that this connects us to God, there's the relationship with the Holy Spirit, and there's some of the outcomes. Now, the outcomes are things like hope, rejoicing, joy, endurance, and character. In other words, what goes on here is a reminder from Paul around the way in which Jesus' death not only restores us to this relationship with God, but it has an effect on us. It transforms us. And Paul's hope here, I would say, is that by reminding them of this, they can bring themselves, the Roman churches and the people in them, bring themselves back into that story. They go looking for this hope. They look for the transformation so that they become the kind of church that will send missionaries out to Spain. So in your preaching, I want to encourage you that we ought to be shooting for the same thing. The outcome here is that people will be so filled with hope, so expectant of personal transformation, so looking to the way in which we'll be united as a group of people, that we too will become a church that sends people out to tell the story of humanity restored. So in the second half of chapter 5, we have this picture. Just like Adam, everybody has sinned, and so everyone is in this problematic state. But in Jesus, we find a new pattern for humanity that brings to life everything that was meant to be about us. So in a Maori setting, it's in the story of Jesus that we find the reality, the true beauty of being Maori. Do you see the kind of thing that you can land this into, as long as we are formed by the power of this in the ways that Paul speaks about in those first few verses of chapter 5. So as long as we connect this to that mission outcome, that story of Jesus, that idea that this is the new pattern for the whole of humanity, it's not just a doctrinal thing. The plane has to land with outcomes. Well, may the Lord be with you as you prepare that, as you bring that forward to your congregations. Mā te atua koutou e manaki, e te aki. Tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā tātou katoa.